The rain fell lightly over the city, as if the sky were weeping silently for untold stories. The wind blew cold between the tall buildings of concrete and glass, while the hurried crowd crossed the streets without noticing the man huddled under a torn awning near a neighborhood bakery. His clothes were dirty, his unshaven beard hid part of his face, and his brown eyes seemed darkened by the dust of the street, but it wasn't poverty that glinted in them. It was calculation. Lorenzo Carranza watched the world from beneath that awning, invisible. The heir to the Carranza empire, valued at over $2 billion, was now undertaking one of the most daring tests of his life, vanishing from the elite and diving into society's most invisible layer, all because of an internal wager not with friends, but with his own principles. He needed to know if someone could love the man he truly was, without the wealth. No rooftop dinners, no imported cars, no Carranza name weighing on his shoulders. Like an invisible crown, he had to know if truth still existed in a world where everything could be bought. That was when she appeared. Camila Dominguez walked down the street with a reusable bag in her arms. She wore a second-hand coat, worn jeans, and a pair of faded sneakers, but moved with a posture that defied the wind itself. She walked quickly, but when her eyes met Lorenzo's, or rather, the homeless man's, she paused. For a second, just 1 second, their eyes met. He looked away, part of the act. She hesitated, then walked into the bakery. Lorenzo sighed, trying not to think about how much that brief moment had stirred him. The mission was simple: stay there for a few weeks, observe, interact, and find someone who had no interest in his status. If it didn't work, he'd return to his old life and accept that cynicism was necessary. But some part of him still believed foolishly that true love existed. Camila came out minutes later with a sweet roll wrapped in craft paper. Instead of walking past like everyone else, she stopped in front of him. She was quiet for a moment. "Are you hungry?" she asked, not looking at him directly. Her voice was firm, but there was a gentleness in her tone. Lorenzo looked up at her, surprised. She was the first person to speak a word that wasn't an insult or pity. He hesitated, carefully taking the roll. "Thank you." She simply nodded, and before he could ask her name, she was already gone. That night, Lorenzo didn't sleep. Not because of the cold, he no longer felt it, but because her image haunted him. Camila had the eyes of someone who had lost a lot, but not her compassion. In the following days, she kept stopping by, sometimes with bread, sometimes with nothing but words. And Lorenzo, though still in disguise, began to feel that perhaps he had found an exception in this world. A woman who saw the person, not the possessions. Camila worked at a community library, earned little, and lived with her sick grandmother in a modest apartment. She had no time for luxuries and no energy for games, which was why she treated Lorenzo like any other human being, and that disarmed him one morning. He saw her arguing with a man in a suit across the street. Her tone was firm, almost harsh. The man, arrogant, tried to grab her arm. Lorenzo stood up instinctively, forgetting the role he had chosen to play. She pulled away on her own, crossed the street with teary eyes, and stopped in front of him. This time, she didn't offer bread. "Have you ever pretended to be someone you're not?" The question cut Lorenzo deeply. He remained silent, unable to answer. Camila looked away, took a deep breath, and murmured, "I don't like lies, even the well-meaning ones." Without another word, she walked away, leaving Lorenzo frozen. For the first time, he wondered if his plan would end up destroying her instead of saving him. The days grew colder, and the city's rhythm remained relentless. Lorenzo continued his role beneath the awning, watching the world unfold with different eyes. What began as a calculated social experiment had started to feel like a punishment, not for the poverty he had known hunger before, in his own way, in sterile boardrooms and empty penthouses, but for the emotions he was now forced to face. Emotions he hadn't expected. Camila stopped visiting for 3 long days. Lorenzo sat there trying not to let it matter. But every footstep that echoed down the sidewalk, every shadow passing near the bakery, made his pulse quicken in hope, then fade in disappointment. He told himself she owed him nothing, that her absence was her right, that he was just a stranger, worse, a liar. But his chest felt heavy in a way no wealth could soothe. On the 4th day, she appeared. Her steps were slower, her posture more guarded. The wind whipped her dark hair around her face as she approached, and for the first time, she looked directly at him, not with pity, but with something closer to confrontation. "You never answered me," she said, voice low, about pretending. Lorenzo shifted uncomfortably on the cold pavement. His eyes met hers, and for a moment, the persona of the poor man faltered. but he caught himself. I think, he said carefully, everyone pretends. Some more than others. Camila didn't blink. You're hiding something. I can feel it, but I don't know why I care. That admission, not expected, hit Lorenzo like a wave. She cared. Even through her suspicion, even through his lie. He stood slowly, cautiously, not wanting to scare her. I haven't told you everything, but I swear I've never lied when I spoke to you. Her eyes softened, but only slightly. Words can lie even when the mouth doesn't. She turned to leave again, but paused. My grandmother's sick, she added quietly. I've been working double shifts. That's why I disappeared. Not because of you, not entirely. Lorenzo's chest tightened. He wanted to reach out, offer help, tell her that he could pay for the best hospital in the state. But he couldn't, not without destroying everything this fragile connection stood for. Is she okay? He asked. She's stable. For now. A pause. And I shouldn't be telling you any of this. I don't even know your name. He hesitated. Miguel. It wasn't his name. Not really. But it was the name his father used when he wanted to disappear for a while. It felt like a fitting tribute. Camila nodded slowly. Miguel, she repeated, tasting the word. I'm Camila, but I guess you already knew that. I didn't, he said honestly. Not until now. A strange silence fell between them, not awkward, not heavy. It was the kind of silence that carried potential, the moment between a spark and a flame. She finally sat down next to him, not too close, but close enough that he could feel the warmth of her presence even in the cold morning air. I don't know why I'm here, she murmured, eyes on the ground. Maybe I'm just tired of talking to people who only hear themselves. Lorenzo offered a half smile. Then, I'll listen. And he did. For the next hour, Camila spoke of small things, her childhood in a two-room apartment. Her dream of becoming a teacher, how she gave that up when her mother died and she had to raise herself. How the city was loud and heartless, but she still loved the smell of bread in the morning and the sun reflecting on puddles after rain. Lorenzo didn't speak much, just nodded, sometimes asked quiet questions. He found himself memorizing her expressions, her voice, the way her eyes lit up when she spoke about books, even though she didn't have time to read anymore. He had never met anyone like her, someone who gave without asking, someone who had nothing, yet carried herself as if her dignity were made of diamonds. As she rose to leave, Camila handed him something she'd been holding in her pocket. It was a folded piece of paper. He waited until she walked away before opening it. Inside, written in blue ink, was a quote, "Be kind, for everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about." Underneath a note, "You don't have to tell me the truth, but don't lie to yourself." Lorenzo closed the note slowly, his throat tightening. He didn't know what hurt more, the beauty of her trust or the inevitability of breaking it. The next morning, the bakery's awning was soaked with dew, and Lorenzo, still Miguel in this version of reality, sat in the same corner, his back against the chilled brick wall. His fingers traced the folds of the paper Camila had given him, the quote now committed to memory. He hadn't slept well, not because of the cold, but because of her words echoing inside him. You don't have to tell me the truth, but don't lie to yourself. That line hit deeper than any business deal gone wrong, deeper than betrayals he had endured in the corporate world. It wasn't just about deception, it was about identity. Who was he, if stripped of the empire, the suits, the Carranza name? What was left? The sound of soft footsteps pulled him from his thoughts. Camila again. This time, her walk had less urgency. She carried a steaming paper cup in one hand and wore a scarf that had clearly seen better days. But she still moved like someone with purpose, graceful, self-assured. She sat beside him without a word, handed him the cup, and stared out into the city as it woke up around them. The distant honking of impatient drivers, the hiss of buses opening their doors, the smell of coffee and wet pavement, it all framed the stillness between them. "It's chamomile," she said. "Helps with anxiety and sleep. You looked like you hadn't had either." Lorenzo accepted the cup with both hands. "Thank you." They drank in silence. The tea was warm and calming, just like her presence. It made him ache with guilt. He wanted to tell her everything, right there on that sidewalk, that he wasn't Miguel, that he wasn't poor, that the ragged jacket on his back had cost less than a single thread in his usual suits. But the fear of destroying what little trust she had built with him made his tongue stay still. Camila finally turned to him. "I think people like you," she said slowly, "carry more stories than they let on." He raised an eyebrow. "People like me." She smiled faintly. "People who sit in silence, who watch more than they speak, who let the world happen around them instead of forcing it to see them." Lorenzo was stunned by her insight. She saw him, not the fake exterior, not even the real man behind it. She saw deeper, into a part of him no one had touched in years. "And you?" he asked softly. "What kind of person are you?" Her smile faded. "I'm the kind that doesn't have time to figure it out." She stood up, brushing dust from her jeans. "I have to go," she said, almost apologetically. "My boss is cutting hours again. If I don't show up early, someone else will take the shift." "Camila," he stood, before realizing he had no right to stop her. "Would you ever want to talk somewhere else? Maybe not here." She looked at him, surprised. "Like what? A cafe? A park?" He nodded. "Maybe." She hesitated, then glanced at her watch. "I'll think about it." That tiny sliver of hope was enough, but as she walked away, something shifted. The street noise faded as Lorenzo noticed a black SUV parked across the avenue. Tinted windows, stationary, subtle but unmistakable. His gut twisted. That was his driver, which meant someone from his real world had followed him here. He turned away, pulled his hood farther over his face. Heart pounding, he couldn't afford to be seen, especially not with Camila nearby. If this leaked, it wouldn't just ruin the plan, it would ruin her. Later that afternoon, he returned to the temporary flat he had rented under a false name. It was modest, barely furnished. No luxury, he needed it that way, to stay in character. But the message waiting for him on the burner phone shattered the illusion of isolation. "You've been gone long enough. Come back, or we come for you." The sender, Alonso Carranza, his uncle and current acting CEO. Lorenzo clenched the phone in his hand. This was the cost of walking away from the throne of N temporarily. The Empire didn't wait, and it certainly didn't forgive disappearances, but he wasn't ready to return, not yet. Not while this story with Camila was still unfolding. He had seen something in her he hadn't found in boardrooms or gala dinners, something that made him feel human again that night. Sleep refused to come. He opened the paper again, read the quote over and over. "Be kind, for everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about." He realized Camila was fighting a battle too, and he was starting to fall for the warrior in her, not in spite of her struggle, but because of it. The next few days passed with a rhythm that Lorenzo had never experienced before. It wasn't the calculated pace of corporate meetings or the relentless beat of luxury events. It was slower, more human, a pattern built from ordinary moments, morning walks, quiet conversations, paper cups of chamomile tea, and shared silences. On a city sidewalk, Camila had agreed reluctantly to meet him in the park after one of her shifts. It wasn't much, just a public bench under a sycamore tree in a small plaza surrounded by food carts and noisy kids. But to Lorenzo, it felt more important than any boardroom table he had ever sat at. She arrived 5 minutes late, hair tied back, wearing a sweatshirt with a tear near the collar. No makeup, no performance, and she was beautiful in a way that stunned him. "You came," he said, rising instinctively. "I said I'd think about it." "I didn't say I wouldn't," she replied, her tone dry but not unfriendly. "Besides, I needed air. And apparently, you're decent company." He smiled, unsure if that was a compliment. "I'll take it." They sat, and she pulled a small wrapped sandwich from her bag, offering half to him. Lorenzo hesitated, then remembered that Miguel would never say no to food. He took it with quiet gratitude. They ate in silence at first, watching pigeons fight over a discarded French fry. Finally, Camila spoke. "I used to come here with my mom," she said, "before she got sick. We'd get mango with chili powder from that cart over there." She pointed. "I hated it, but she loved it, so I pretended I liked it too." Lorenzo listened, his chest tightening. "Did she pass?" Camila nodded. 2 years ago, cancer, fast, ugly." He wanted to say, "I'm sorry," but the words felt empty. Instead, he said, "You're stronger than you look." She gave a sad smile. "I have to be. There's no one else to hold things up." Lorenzo felt a sudden urge to touch her hand, to say, "I can hold it with you." But that wasn't his place, not yet, not like this. Instead, he offered something he hadn't told anyone in a long time. "My mother left when I was 6. Camila looked at him, surprised. "She left a note, said she loved me, but couldn't stay. My father said it was her or the money. She chose to leave." There was a pause, as if she were measuring his words. "You don't talk like most people out here," she said carefully. Lorenzo froze for a moment, afraid she was seeing through the cracks. "What do you mean?" he asked. "I mean," she said, still watching him, "you listen. Most men I meet talk about themselves, brag. You listen first." He relaxed slightly. That, he could live with. They walked for a while after finishing the sandwich, circling the park slowly. The conversation became lighter favorite books, strange dreams, embarrassing childhood memories. She made him laugh when she told him how she once thought architect meant king of buildings. I used to want to be one, she said, but now I just want to be able to pay rent without panicking. He stopped walking. Do you ever still dream? She looked up at him. I think I do, but dreams feel like luxuries now. And I'm not rich enough for luxuries. He wanted to scream that she deserved everything, that he could give her the world, that she didn't need to carry all this alone, but he also knew that if he offered those things, it wouldn't come from Miguel, it would come from Lorenzo. And she didn't know who Lorenzo was. The next day, everything fell apart. Lorenzo arrived at his usual spot outside the bakery early, wanting to see Camila before her shift. But as he approached, he noticed a sleek black car parked across the street again, same make, same tinted windows. Only this time, the door opened. A man stepped out, tall and sharp in a tailored gray suit. Alonso Carranza. His uncle. The man crossed the street like he owned it, not bothering to lower his voice. Lorenzo, he said flatly, ignoring the few pedestrians who turned to stare. What in God's name are you doing? Lorenzo's stomach dropped. He tried to stay in character, glancing away, hoping the disguise still held. Alonso sneered. Really, you're pretending to be homeless now? Are you out of your mind? From the corner of his eye, Lorenzo saw Camila walking toward the bakery. Time slowed. She saw Alonso, then saw him, Miguel, standing there, frozen. She saw the way. The man looked at him, not like a stranger, but like someone who knew him, intimately, with power. Her eyes narrowed. Confusion flooded her face, followed by something worse, recognition, not of his true identity, but of betrayal. She turned around, and walked away. Lorenzo's heart collapsed inside his chest. He ran. Not in the literal sense. Lorenzo stayed standing, still as stone, but inside. Everything inside him was sprinting after her, screaming for her to stop, to turn around, to let him explain, but his legs refused to move, as if weighted by the lies he'd wrapped around himself. Camila disappeared around the corner, swallowed by the city, and all that was left was the echo of her footsteps and the thunderous silence she left behind. Alonso didn't seem to care. He adjusted his cufflinks with practiced precision and raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. You know, it would almost be admirable if it weren't so pathetic, he said. Playing pauper to chase some street girl. What's the plan, nephew? A wedding in a soup kitchen. Lorenzo turned to him, rage simmering under his skin. Leave. I'm not here for small talk, Alonso said, stepping closer. I'm here because the board is getting nervous. You disappear for weeks. Investors start sniffing around, and the vultures start circling. You have responsibilities, Lorenzo. This isn't a sabbatical, it's sabotage. This has nothing to do with the company. Alonso laughed, one sharp hollow. Everything you do has to do with the company. You are the company. No, I'm a man, a person, and I needed to remember that. Alonso's face darkened. Don't let sentimentality make you stupid. You don't get to be normal. You never did. You were born with the crown. You either wear it or you die under it. With that, he turned and left, his footsteps clicking against the pavement like a gavel sealing a sentence. Lorenzo stood there for a long time after the car drove away. Tourists passed by. A dog barked. Somewhere, someone laughed. And through it all, he stood motionless, watching the corner where she had vanished, feeling more lost than he had ever felt in his life. That night, he didn't return to his flat. He walked the city aimlessly, past bridges and bars and shuttered bookstores, letting the night peel him down to the bone. When he finally collapsed onto a bench near the river, dawn was already softening the sky, and in the quiet hour between night and morning, a memory surfaced. He was 16, sitting in his mother's old garden, listening to her voice as she told him a story from her childhood, about a boy who gave everything to win a girl's love, his money, his title, his freedom, and in the end, when he stood before her with nothing, she kissed him and said, "Now I can love you without fear." He had laughed at the time, thought it foolish. Now he wasn't so sure. The next day, he went to the library where Camila worked. She wasn't there. He waited outside, hours passing, hoping to catch a glimpse of her, but she never came. On the third day, he worked up the courage to ask the front desk clerk, a young woman with tight curls and kind eyes. She took a leave. The woman said, "Family emergency," said she didn't know when she'd be back. Lorenzo's heart dropped. "Do you know where she lives?" The woman hesitated. "Are you a friend?" He nodded. "Yes, a stupid one." She scribbled an address on a piece of paper and handed it over with a warning look. "Don't make it worse." He didn't intend to. Later that evening, he found the building, a narrow, aging complex tucked behind a laundromat, paint peeling, Iron stairs rusted with time, the kind of place where every dollar counted. He stood at the foot of the steps, suddenly unsure. Was he ready to face her? He climbed slowly, heart pounding, and knocked on the door marked 3B. No answer. He knocked again. Footsteps shuffled inside, then stopped. A pause, then the door cracked open. Sia Malay, her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, face pale with exhaustion. Behind her, the hum of medical equipment, a faint beep-beep rhythm, and the shadowy outline of an elderly woman sleeping in a recliner. "What are you doing here?" she asked, voice low, flat. "I needed to see you." She didn't open the door further. "Why? To lie again? To pretend you're someone else?" "Because I don't have time for games. Miguel Lorenzo, whoever the hell you are." He swallowed hard. "I never lied about how I felt. You lied about everything else. I was trying to protect something real, I thought. If I showed you who I really was, it would change things." Her eyes filled with quiet fury. "It does change things, because it means you didn't trust me to handle the truth. It means you decided for me, and now, every word you said feels like part of the act." "I was falling in love with you," he whispered. Her jaw clenched. "You don't get to say that, not like this." She started to close the door. "Camila, wait please. Just let me explain. You had your chance, and..." Then the door clicked shut. This time Lorenzo didn't run. He just stood there, staring at the wood between them, knowing he had finally told the truth, and it still wasn't enough. 3 days passed. Lorenzo didn't return to the flat. He didn't check his phone, or the emails piling up in the burner account he barely ate. His world had shrunk down to a door labeled 3B, and the echo of it shutting in his face. Camila hadn't just rejected him, she had closed the last sliver of trust he'd been desperately trying to earn back, and he couldn't blame her. He had lied. No matter how noble he believed the reasons were, no matter how real his emotions had been, he had chosen deception over vulnerability, and now he was paying for it. Still, he couldn't leave things like that. He wouldn't. Not when her words haunted him every time he closed his eyes. "You decided for me." That was what hurt her most, not the lie itself, but the way he had taken away her right to choose. In his world, decisions were made in silence, behind doors, with control and calculation, but Camila wasn't from his world. She deserved honesty, clarity, freedom. On the 4th morning, he woke with a plan. It wouldn't fix everything. It might not fix anything, but he owed her more than silence. He returned to the building, but this time he didn't knock. Instead, he left something at her door, a small envelope unmarked. Inside was a letter handwritten, no signature, and a single gold key. Camila didn't open it immediately. She found it on her way out to pick up medication for her grandmother. Her first instinct was to toss it, but the envelope was light, and the corner of the key inside pressed against the paper, intriguing her. She stuffed it into her bag, carried it all day without looking at it. It wasn't until late at night, when the apartment was quiet and her grandmother was finally asleep, that she sat on the edge of the sofa and tore it open. The letter was short. "I have no right to ask for your time, or your forgiveness. But there's a part of me you never saw. Part I tried to keep hidden because I thought it would ruin what we had. This key opens the back entrance of a place I grew up in, a place I haven't shown anyone in over a decade. Not investors, not friends, not family. If you want answers, real ones, I'll be there tomorrow at noon. No more masks. You don't owe me anything, but I owe you the truth." Elsie stared at it for a long time. 1,000 voices in her head told her not to go, but this was another manipulation, another twist in a rich man's game. But another voice, the quieter one, whispered something else. "You said you wanted truth. What if this is it?" The next day, Camila arrived at a gated building nestled between warehouses on the edge of the river. At first glance it looked abandoned, windows shuttered, exterior weather. But when she used the key, the lock clicked smoothly, and the back door opened into a space unlike anything she expected. It was a greenhouse, massive and overgrown, filled with wild plants, forgotten benches, a cracked glass ceiling letting sunlight pour through like gold dust. Nature had reclaimed most of it, vines curled around rusted pipes. Birds nested in the rafters, but it was breathtaking. Lorenzo stood near the center, in jeans and a simple shirt, his posture tense, uncertain. "This used to be my mother's," he said as she stepped in her private sanctuary. "She kept it hidden from the press, from my father, from almost everyone." Camila looked around, speechless. "She built this before I was born," he continued, "tended it every day. Said it was the only place she ever felt free. After she left, I couldn't bring myself to tear it down, so I just stopped coming." Camila folded her arms. "Why here? Why now?" "Because this place is the opposite of everything I've become," he said quietly. And I needed to stand here, in front of you, and let you see the parts of me I never show anyone. She walked further in, scanning the space. The scent of earth and rainwater filled the air. Didn't come here to be impressed, she said. I know. I don't care about money, or legacies, or glass ceilings. I know that too. She faced him. Then what do you want from me? Lorenzo, I want you to see me, he said, voice cracking. Not the lie, not the performance. Just me, the man who made a terrible mistake because he was afraid that the one person who truly mattered would walk away if she knew the truth. Camila was silent for a long time. The wind moved through the broken panes above them like breath. I didn't walk away because of the lie, she said finally. I walked away because you didn't trust me to choose. He lowered his head. And I never will make that mistake again, I swear to you. She looked down at the key in her hand. I haven't decided yet, she said, whether I forgive you, whether I even want you in my life. I understand, but I'm here. That has to mean something. His eyes met hers. It means everything. They stood there, between the overgrowth and broken glass, two people more raw and exposed than ever before. No disguises, no shields, just truth. For the first time in a long time, it felt like something real had finally taken root. Camila left the greenhouse without saying goodbye. There was no dramatic exit, no final word, just silence. A silence heavier than any argument. Lorenzo didn't try to follow. He stood among the vines and shattered glass, letting the weight of her indecision settle over him like dust. He knew better than to expect forgiveness right away. But part of him had hoped for even a flicker of it. Her presence had been enough to spark something in him, but her absence now burned deeper than he could admit. He spent the rest of the day there, cleaning the space, pulling weeds, lifting fallen pots, sweeping the floor. It was as if tending to the greenhouse could somehow earn him redemption, as if restoring what his mother loved could fix what he had broken. By nightfall, his hands were raw and bleeding from thorns, but he didn't stop. Not until the space began to resemble a sanctuary again. Not perfect, but living. Like him, Camila didn't sleep that night. She sat by the window of her apartment, legs curled beneath her, watching the streetlights flicker. Inside, her grandmother's breathing machine hummed softly. The only other sound was the low tick of a wall clock. Her mind was a battlefield. She kept seeing Lorenzo, not Miguel, standing in that greenhouse, vulnerable, unpolished, and for once, not performing. He had let her in, truly, and that terrified her more than the lie, because if what he showed her was real, it meant she had something to lose, and Camila had spent her entire life preparing not to. The next day, she didn't go to the library. She needed space, time, so she walked miles through the city, past neighborhoods where no one knew her name, past memories she hadn't touched in years, past the school where she once taught music before the budget cuts, past the building where her mother died, and she'd sworn never to return. Everything in her life had been built on survival, scraping by, getting through the next month, the next bill, the next emergency. She had stopped believing in possibility a long time ago, but Lorenzo was possibility. The kind that knocked on your door in disguise. The kind that ripped your rules to shreds. And that, too, was dangerous. Meanwhile, the Carranza name was stirring again. Lorenzo hadn't answered calls, hadn't returned messages. The press had noticed his absence from 2 corporate charity events, and a high-profile auction rumors swirled. Illness, depression, a secret scandal. Alonso Carranza was growing restless. He didn't care about Lorenzo's emotional detours. He cared about the empire, and what Lorenzo was doing now, playing homeless. Chasing after a working-class girl wasn't just reckless. It was threatening. So he decided to act. Camila was at the pharmacy, picking up medicine for her grandmother. When it happened, a woman approached her, tall, elegant, with sharp eyes and a voice like velvet dipped in judgment. You're Camila Dominguez, aren't you? Camila turned, cautious. Who's asking? The woman smiled. I represent the Carranza Foundation. We've heard about your work at the library, and your personal story is compelling. We're considering candidates for a new educational grant. Perhaps you'd be interested. Camila narrowed her eyes. I didn't apply for anything, no, but sometimes we prefer to find talent ourselves. The woman handed her a sleek business card. Call me, she said. I think you'll find our offer generous. And then she was gone. Camila stared at the card. She wasn't stupid. This wasn't coincidence. This was a test. Or worse, a trap. That evening she didn't go home right away. Instead, she found herself outside the greenhouse again. The city felt quieter there, as if time had paused. Lorenzo was inside, kneeling in the dirt, replanting something. His hands were filthy, but his expression was calm, focused. He hadn't seen her yet. Camilla stood at the doorway, unsure of why she'd come. Maybe to see if he would lie again. Maybe to see if her heart would stop racing around him. Or maybe, just maybe, to ask the question that had been burning in her chest since the woman approached her. Are you trying to buy my forgiveness? Lorenzo looked up, startled. Then he stood, brushing dirt from his hands. No, he said simply, but I think someone else is. Camilla stepped inside, card in hand. Then you know, he nodded. Alonzo sent her. He's trying to manipulate you into walking away. And why would he do that? She asked, crossing her arms. Because you're the only thing in my life I chose for myself. She paused. The weight of that admission settled between them. I don't want your money, she said. I never thought you did, but I need to know, she swallowed. If all of this falls apart, if you walk away from your legacy, your power, your name, what's left of you? Lorenzo didn't flinch. He walked closer, his voice steady. Just a man who made mistakes, who lied out of fear, who loves a woman that he doesn't deserve, but hopes she might believe in him anyway. Camilla looked down. I'm not sure what I believe in anymore. Then let me show you. No more lies, no more hiding, just time. She looked up at him, and for the first time, she didn't see a millionaire, or a liar, or a fantasy. She saw a man bruised, flawed, fighting to be better, and for now, that was enough. Asterisk. The following weeks unfolded like the slow blooming of a fragile flower. No declarations, no promises, just presence. Camilla returned to the greenhouse every few days, never at the same hour, never saying in advance, and Lorenzo never asked her to. He simply waited, cleaning, restoring, planting. Each time she came, she brought something small, a book, a sandwich, a silence, and each time she left, she took a little more of his guardedness with her. They didn't talk about the lie, not directly, not yet. Instead, they talked about life, real life, her childhood in a one-bedroom apartment, her grandmother's obsession with old novellas, the first time she ever fell in love, and how quickly that boy disappeared when money got tight. Lorenzo, in turn, shared pieces of his own history, his mother's quiet rebellion against the Carranza name, his father's emotional absence, always present in suits and schedules, but never in substance, the suffocation of growing up in a mansion full of people paid to love him. The greenhouse became their trucer, sacred space where titles were left at the door, where she was not a struggling caregiver and he was not a billionaire heir, just Camilla and Lorenzo. And yet, the outside world refused to stay outside. It started with a headline. Camilla was on the bus, on her way home from a tutoring session. She'd picked up for extra cash when she saw the news on someone else's phone screen. Carranza heir disappears amid company shake-up, rumors of mental breakdown surface as family tensions rise. Her stomach dropped. Later that night, she searched for more. Dozens of articles, speculation, anonymous sources, whispers of boardroom fights and frozen accounts, paparazzi shots of Alonso storming out of a building, investors losing patience, and not one mention of where Lorenzo actually was. He was disappearing for her, slowly, piece by piece, and it terrified her. The next morning, she stormed into the greenhouse. He was trimming a fern, dirt on his knees, sleeves rolled up. What are you doing? She demanded. But Lorenzo looked up, surprised. Good morning to you too. Don't play cute. She threw her phone onto a nearby bench, the screen still glowing with headlines. They're tearing you apart out there. You're being erased. He stood slowly, brushing off his hands. I told you, I walked away. Now you abandon a legacy. You're burning bridges you can't rebuild. For me, he stepped closer. No, for me, for the version of me I want to become. You just happened to be the one who showed me he still existed. Camilla's voice dropped, trembling. And what if you lose everything? The company, your inheritance, your reputation, what then? I'm still me, he said. And if that isn't enough, then none of it ever was. She shook her head, backing away. You don't understand what it's like to have nothing. I do. And I can't watch you throw everything away when so many people would kill for what you have. Lorenzo's expression softened. You think I'm doing this recklessly, but I've never been clearer. I'm not asking for your permission. I'm asking if you believe this version of me is worth saving. Camilla turned away, her hands clenched into fists. I don't know. You make me feel things I don't have room for. I've spent my entire life trying to survive. I can't afford to collapse just because you're discovering your soul. Her words hit like thunder, and yet, Lorenzo didn't flinch. I'm not asking you to collapse, he said. I'm asking you to let me stand beside you while you keep rising. The silence between them crackled. Somewhere outside, a siren, wailed in the distance. Camila finally spoke, her voice smaller. If I let you in again, it has to be on my terms. Lorenzo nodded. Then say the word. Set the rules. I'll follow them. That night Camila drafted a letter, not for Lorenzo but for herself. She wrote everything she feared: abandonment, dependence, weakness, the terror of being seen, the ache of being loved on borrowed time. She wrote until her hand ached and her throat tightened. Then she burned it in the kitchen sink. If she was going to let herself feel, it had to begin with release. But as things between them slowly shifted toward trust again, something darker brewed in the background. Alonso Carranza had not been idle. With Lorenzo refusing to return, the board had begun pushing for control. Rumors of mental unfitness circulated quietly. Lawyers were involved, and if Alonso could prove Lorenzo was compromised emotionally or psychologically, he could legally challenge his authority over the company. But that wouldn't be enough. Alonso wanted to crush this version of Lorenzo, to humiliate him, to show him that idealism was weakness, and he knew exactly where to strike Camila. He didn't need to destroy her, just expose her. A single well-placed leak, a photograph, a past mistake, anything to turn her into a scandal. So he sent someone. That next morning, as Camila opened the front door of her building, a man stepped forward. Mid-30s, too polished for the neighborhood, holding a leather folder and a camera bag. Ms. Dominguez, he asked with a practiced smile. I'm working on a human interest piece for a philanthropic magazine. Word is you've been spending time with Lorenzo Carranza. Quick quote. Her heart went cold. How did you find me? Just a few questions, he said, flipping open a notepad. Maybe something about your background, how you met, what it's like to date one of the richest men in the country. She stepped back. Get off my porch. You don't want to miss the opportunity, he added, still smiling. It'll all come out soon anyway. Camila slammed a door in his face, heart hammering. She wasn't scared for herself. She was scared for what this would do to Lorenzo. Camila didn't sleep that night. She sat on the edge of her bed, knees pulled to her chest, her phone face down on the nightstand like a ticking bomb. The knock from the journalist, if that's what he even was, still echoed in her ears. His smile, his certainty, his warning. It'll all come out soon anyway. What would come out? What had they found? She didn't have skeletons. She had scars, poverty, grief, disappointment, but not shame. Unless they twisted it. Unless they made her the scandal, the scheming girl from the wrong side of the city, the gold digger, the opportunist. The thought made her sick. But worse than that was the fear that it could hurt him, Lorenzo. No matter what she felt, no matter how unsure she was of where their story was going, she knew one thing. She would not be the reason he lost everything. Lorenzo didn't hear from her the next day, or the day after that. He tried calling twice, but got no answer. He walked to her apartment once and stood outside for 30 minutes, debating whether to knock. He didn't. He had promised not to push, not to control the pace, but by the third day, he felt it in his bones. Something was wrong. That evening, a headline confirmed it. Carranza heir involved with library clerk. Who is Camila Dominguez? From caregiver to controversy, the woman behind the fall of Lorenzo Carranza. Lorenzo stared at the screen in disbelief. There was a grainy photo of Camila stepping out of her building, clearly taken without consent. Another image showed the greenhouse door slightly ajar. Someone had followed them, or perhaps a drone. The article mentioned sources and insiders, quoted unnamed board members, and even hinted that she had infiltrated Lorenzo's life while vulnerable. It was cruel, invasive, and deliberate. His blood boiled. He rushed to her apartment. Camila opened the door, expecting him. She looked tired, not angry, not tearful, just ... hollow. I was going to call you, she said before he could speak, but I didn't know what to say. Lorenzo stepped inside. You didn't do anything wrong. I did by trusting this would stay ours. She walked back toward the couch, folding a blanket over the arm. I should have known they'd come for me. They came for me. You were just the easiest way to get to me. Camila turned to face him, arms crossed. They don't care about the truth. They'll twist everything, turn me into a narrative they can destroy. I won't let that happen. She laughed bitterly. You can't stop it. You think money and power are enough to control this. You left your empire to find something real, and the empire didn't leave you. Lorenzo stepped forward, his voice low and steady. Then let's tell our version of the story before they finish writing theirs. She stared at him. What are you suggesting? A press conference. Together, no PR team, no spin. Just us. We tell the truth, how we met, what happened, why I left the company, why I'm not coming back. We strip their power away by being honest. Camilla's eyes widened. You'd put your name on that, your reputation, he nodded. I already have. I lost a version of myself they wanted to protect, and I'm not sorry for that. She took a deep breath, the air catching in her lungs. I don't want to be famous. I don't want to be a martyr. You won't be either. You'll just be you, and that's enough. She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. The next morning, the greenhouse was transformed, not by flowers or lights but by presence. Camilla stood beside Lorenzo at a podium hastily set up inside. A few reporters, a couple of cameras, number, branding, no logo, just truth. Lorenzo began. He didn't apologize for disappearing. He explained why. He talked about wealth as a prison, about losing himself inside boardrooms, about the loneliness that no amount of money could cure. Then he talked about her. He said her name with reverence, not as a savior, not as a symbol but as a person. He told them how they met, why he lied, what he learned, what he regretted, and what he would never give up again. Camilla didn't speak much. She said only what needed to be said. I didn't fall in love with a billionaire. I fell in love with a man who didn't know who he was, and who was brave enough to find out. It was raw, imperfect, powerful. The headlines didn't change overnight. The tabloids kept spinning. But something shifted. The public saw them, not the caricatures, but the people. And for once, Lorenzo didn't feel the need to control the story. But in another building, Alonzo watched the live stream from his office, fingers steepled beneath his chin. She thinks love makes him strong, he muttered. Then he looked to his assistant. Let's show them what happens when feelings get in the way of power. They had no illusions of peace. After the press conference, Camilla and Lorenzo returned to the greenhouse, not as victors, but as survivors. The air was quiet inside, heavy with everything unsaid. They sat side by side on the wooden bench he'd sanded down weeks earlier. Their fingers brushed, and for a moment, that was enough. For the first time, they had faced the world on their terms, but the world wasn't done with them yet. The backlash came slowly, at first disguised in polite concern. Is she qualified to speak on his behalf? Is this a mental health crisis disguised as romance? Should the Carranza board consider replacing him permanently? Then came the cruelty. A viral video of Camilla mispronouncing a word during the press conference, edited, mocked, turned into a meme. A resurfaced blog post she wrote at 19 about income inequality was reframed as anti-capitalist extremism. The internet did what it always did, dehumanized. And through it all, Lorenzo remained calm. Publicly, privately, he raged. He knew this wasn't organic. He recognized the strategy, the way stories were planted, the timing, the tone. It was Alonzo's playbook, textbook, reputation warfare. And now that Camilla had become his heart, Alonzo was aiming directly at it. But Camilla, she didn't run. She didn't cry. She worked. She returned to the library, helped at the community center, took her grandmother to her appointments, and refused to change her daily rhythm to accommodate noise she hadn't asked for. One evening, Lorenzo found her on the floor of her apartment, surrounded by receipts and documents. I'm applying for a teaching fellowship, she said without looking up. I can't build a future on your name. I need something of my own. Lorenzo sat beside her. I wouldn't ask for anything less. She paused, glanced at him. Even if the world keeps trying to make me your scandal. He met her gaze. You were never my scandal. You're my compass. She blinked fast, then returned to her papers. Night, he held her while she slept on the couch, arms curled around a folder labeled Camila Dominguez application packet. And for a moment, the world outside didn't exist, but the world never stayed quiet for long. 2 days later, the trap was sprung. An anonymous leak. A video, grainy footage security camera angle showing Lorenzo and his Miguel, this guy's entering a Carranza corporate building weeks before his disappearance. The narrative was immediate. Carranza air caught trespassing, dressed as homeless man, mental breakdown, or corporate espionage. The implication that Lorenzo had been unstable long before the press conference, that his relationship with Camila was just one part of a larger pattern of erratic behavior, that perhaps he was a danger to himself or worse, to the company. Saw the footage before he did. She watched it alone, twice. The first time with numb disbelief. The second time with fear. Not fear of Lorenzo. Fear for him. Fear that the empire he tried to leave behind was tightening its grip again. When he arrived at her apartment that night, she didn't speak, just handed him her phone. He watched the footage, without reaction, just clenched his jaw and stared through the screen. This was Alonso, he said finally. I know, she replied, but it's working. He turned to her. Then we fight. She stepped back. No, You fight. I can't be in this war anymore, Lorenzo. I have too much to lose. He stared at her, stunned. Are you saying you're leaving? I'm saying I don't know who I am in your story anymore, she said, voice cracking. Every time I try to build something stable, another part of your past knocks it down. I'm trying to protect you. I don't need protection. I need peace. A beat of silence. Then she whispered, and I don't know if I can have that with you. Lorenzo looked away, pain creeping across his face. You once said you didn't want love built on borrowed time. I thought we had more than that. So did I. The silence that followed wasn't cold, it was heartbreaking because both of them knew this wasn't betrayal. This was overwhelm. The kind of pressure that broke good things before they had time to grow. Camila stepped forward, placing her hand gently on his chest. I love who you are becoming, she said softly, but I need space to become myself too. He closed his eyes as if trying to memorize the shape of her touch. Will you come back? He asked. I don't know, she said, but if I do, it'll be for me, not because you begged. Then she kissed him once, soft lingering. Finally, and walked back into her apartment. The door didn't slam, it closed slowly, and left Lorenzo alone in the hallway, holding a truth heavier than any fortune he'd ever carried. Sometimes love didn't leave because it died, it left because it needed to breathe. Needed to breathe. The silence after Camila's departure was deafening. Not the silence of an empty room, but the kind that echoed inside Lorenzo's chest, loud and slow and devastating. He stood in her hallway long after the door closed, unable to move, like if he stayed there long enough, her absence might reverse itself, that she'd open the door and say, just kidding, and everything would fall back into place. But she didn't, and it did single quotes. Then a week Lorenzo didn't return to the greenhouse. He couldn't bear to the scent of soil reminded him too much of her voice. The vines looked like memories, crawling across his skin. Instead, he wandered, not in disguise this time, just as himself. No chauffeur, no tailored suits. He took the bus. He sat in coffee shops where no one knew his name. He watched people live ordinary lives, the kind he had once dismissed as forgettable, but now craved with aching desperation. He didn't call her. He wanted to, 1,000 times, but something inside him whispered, you asked her to choose. Let her. So he chose to. Not to wallow, but to become. He scheduled meetings with the Carranza board, walked into rooms that had once intimidated even seasoned executives, and sat across from men who had already drafted his obituary. They didn't see a broken air anymore. They saw a man with fire in his eyes, and no fear left in his voice. I'm not here to reclaim the company, he told them. I'm here to transform it. A murmur of skepticism. But Lorenzo wasn't bluffing. He proposed a restructuring, a redirection of resources toward community investment, scholarships, healthcare partnerships, environmental restoration, initiatives that would have made his mother proud and made Alonso furious. You're proposing charity over growth, Alonso barked during the final session. I'm proposing legacy over greed, Lorenzo replied. And if the shareholders disagree, they're free to sell. It was a gamble, but one by one, key investors backed him, because even if they didn't believe in his heart, they believed in his courage. Meanwhile, Camila was rebuilding in her own way. She moved her grandmother into a new facilities, more, but dignified. She used the last of her savings for the first month's care, then threw herself into work like a woman trying to outrun her own shadow. She didn't watch the news, didn't read articles, didn't stalk Lorenzo's name online. But one morning, while buying tea from the street vendor near the library, she overheard two older women talking, ... and now he's turning the company into some kind of philanthropic empire. The Carranza boy. Camila froze. Her heart didn't race. It ached. He was doing it without her. Not to win her back, but because he believed in it. And somehow, that made it even more powerful. Weeks passed. Camila received an email one morning, while reviewing applications at the community center. Subject: Dominguez Fellowship Finalist SDHUS. She stared at the screen, eyes wide. She hadn't expected it, had almost forgotten she applied. Her hand trembled as she clicked. Dear Ms. Dominguez, after careful consideration, you have been selected as a finalist for the Dominguez Teaching Fellowship, honoring educators of exceptional promise and community impact. Her name. Her identity. Her value. Not attached to anyone else, just hers. She felt tears forming but didn't let them fall. Not yet. Instead, she sat back in her chair, stared out the window and whispered, I did it. Not because she left Lorenzo, but because she didn't lose herself when she met him. That evening, she walked past the greenhouse. Not to go in, just to see it. But something stopped her. The door was open. Soft lights glowed inside. and through the glass she saw something she hadn't expected. Children, a small group of kids sitting in a circle, listening to a volunteer read a story. There were benches, mats, notebooks scattered everywhere, a chalkboard on one side. The broken space had become a learning sanctuary. She stepped closer. A sign was posted outside. The Grow House Project, free after-school support for youth, founded by Lorenzo Carranza. Inspired by Camila Dominguez, her hand flew to her mouth. Didn't notice the tears until they hit her wrist. Inside, Lorenzo wasn't reading. He wasn't even present. This wasn't a grand gesture. It wasn't a performance. It was legacy. A tribute, and maybe a quiet invitation. Camila didn't knock that night. She went home, made tea, sat on her couch, and thought. She had said she'd come back only if it was for her. Maybe it finally was. The next morning, Camila stood at the gate of the greenhouse. The city behind her buzzed like always horns. Footsteps, impatient voices, but the space before her felt suspended in a softer rhythm. Children's laughter echoed faintly from within. She could smell damp earth and lemon balm. Something about it grounded her. She wasn't sure why she had come. Not to confess anything. Not to reignite what had once burned so hot it almost scorched them both. She came to see. To understand whether what Lorenzo had built was truly rooted or just another romantic impulse. What she saw moved her more than she expected. Dozens of children, books stacked in crates, a small whiteboard where math problems were scribbled beside hopeful, clumsy drawings. Volunteers from the community she recognized, people she knew didn't have much, but were always first to give what little they did. No press, no branding, no suits. Just service. And at the far end, tending to a row of herbs with his sleeves rolled up, was Lorenzo. He didn't see her at first. He was speaking to a boy with a chipped tooth and scraped knees, teaching him how to plant basil. His tone was patient, gentle. He listened more than he spoke. Camila waited until the boy ran off, then took a breath and stepped inside. Lorenzo looked up, and for a moment he simply stared at her like he wasn't sure if she was real or a memory returning to haunt him. Camila broke the silence. "You named the project after me." He smiled faintly. "It felt right. You didn't ask me. It wasn't for credit. It was for truth." She stepped closer. "You didn't do all this for me, did you?" "No," he said, standing. "I did it because you made me want to do it. There's a difference." The words hung between them, not coated in desperation, not tangled in apology, just honest. Camila looked around, then back at him. "It's beautiful. It's just the beginning," he said. Then added, more quietly, "But it would mean more if you were part of it." She didn't answer, not with words. She knelt beside him, dipped her fingers into the soil, and began helping replant the herbs. It wasn't a declaration, it was a beginning. For the first time in months, they didn't talk about the past. They worked. They repotted, swept, reorganized the reading corner. Camila offered feedback. Lorenzo listened. They argued about shelf placement, laughed over an old radio someone donated, ate cold empanadas in the break room with 2 teenage volunteers. By sunset, the greenhouse glowed with quiet joy. Not passion. Not chaos. Stability. Night. They didn't sleep together. Camila went home. Lorenzo didn't ask her to stay. And that, somehow, felt more intimate than anything they'd shared before. But peace rarely lasts. The next day, as Lorenzo left a board meeting that ended with cautious optimism and surprising support, his phone vibrated. An anonymous number. He almost ignored it, but instinct made him answer. A distorted voice crackled through the line. "She's not safe, Lorenzo, and if you don't pull out of the Grow House project, she won't be." Click. Silence. His entire body tense. That same evening, Camila noticed something strange. As she left the grocery store, a car across the street revved its engine but didn't move. A man leaned on the hood, staring at her sunglasses, earbud, no expression. When she looked again, he was gone. Coincidence, maybe, but she'd lived long enough in the margins to know the difference between a random look and surveillance. Lorenzo didn't hesitate. He went straight to Alonso's office. Security tried to stop him. He didn't care. He burst through the glass doors like a storm, fists clenched, voice sharp. "You threatened her." Alonso didn't look surprised. He stood slowly, walked to the bar cart, and poured himself a drink. "You were warned," he said calmly. "This project of yours is making the board nervous. They want traditional returns, not social reform. That's not your call." "No," Alonso agreed. "But it's theirs, and they still hold the majority, for now." Lorenzo stepped closer. "Leave her out of it." Alonso met his eyes, then step away. Quietly, no scandal, no drama, Return to your place at the head of the table, or we'll do what's necessary to make this all disappear. Lorenzo didn't speak, didn't scream. He simply walked out. But his silence wasn't surrender, it was strategy that night. Lorenzo called Camila, told her everything. She didn't panic, didn't retreat. She simply said, "Then we fight smart, together," and, for the first time, neither of them was pretending. They weren't faking strength, or independence, or love. They were just ready for what came next. They didn't sleep. That night, Lorenzo and Camila sat on the floor of her apartment, surrounded by documents, legal drafts, and old company records Lorenzo had discreetly downloaded from the Carranza network. Their tea went cold. The city hummed outside, but in that room, something burned hotter than fear. Purpose. "This isn't just about you anymore," Camila said, highlighting a passage. "This is about precedent. If they force you out because you changed the model, every heir after, you will be terrified to do the right thing." Lorenzo nodded. "And if I back down now, they'll think threats work, that they can erase people like you. People like us," she corrected. For the first time, he smiled, not the charismatic smirk he used in boardrooms, but something softer, real. They were done hiding, done apologizing for wanting more than survival. The plan was risky. They would call an emergency shareholders assembly, not just the major players, everyone, the small investors, the silent partners, the ones who never had a seat at the table but held just enough to sway a vote if given a reason. Lorenzo wouldn't beg for his position back. He would put it to a vote. He would let them decide, continue the cycle of profit and power, or evolve, and, to ensure they listened, they would need to expose Alonso. Not just as a manipulator, but as a man who had weaponized fear, silenced reform, and risked criminal tactics to retain control. They had proof just enough. Leaked documents, a whistleblower, testimony, surveillance footage from a private investigator Lorenzo had once hired during his father's final years. It would be messy, explosive, and final. The morning of the assembly, Camila stood behind the curtain of the Carranza Foundation auditorium, watching people flood in, investors, journalists, executives, legal advisors. Whispers filled the space like smoke. She wore a blazer she borrowed from a neighbor, hair pulled back, heart hammering. Lorenzo stood beside her in a simple navy suit. Not flashy, not armor. He took her hand. "I'm scared," he admitted. She squeezed. "Good. It means you're not numb," he exhaled. "No matter what happens, you've already changed the game." They stepped into the light. Lorenzo didn't start with numbers. He started with a story. About a greenhouse, about a woman who gave him bread, without knowing who he was, about a company that had forgotten people in pursuit of power. He didn't ask for applause or forgiveness. He asked for vision. "Profit is not purpose," he said, "and legacy should never be built on silence." He presented the reforms, the grow house expansion, education, partnerships, a new profit-sharing model with ethical caps. Then came the proof, slide by slide. Alonso's manipulation, his threats, the call traced back to his assistant, the planted media, the intimidation campaign. Gasps filled the room. Someone stood, then another. A woman from a tech investment firm raised her hand. "You have my vote." A man from the Latin American development branch echoed, "And mine." One by one, hands rose, not just for Lorenzo, for change. Alonso didn't shout, didn't storm out. He stood at the back, watching his grip dissolve, and for the first time he looked small, powerless, irrelevant. He turned, walked away without a word. The vote passed. After the cameras dimmed and the crowd dispersed, Lorenzo and Camila stood alone on the stage. He looked at her. "I didn't win." "No," she agreed. "We did." He stepped closer, eyes glinting. "You're not just part of this story, Camila. You're the reason it exists." She touched his face. "I'm not a symbol, Lorenzo. I'm not your redemption. I know, me, and I choose to be here." Those words, "I choose," struck deeper than any "I love you" ever could, because this time, love wasn't born from desperation. It was a decision, and decisions were stronger than fate. Later that night, the greenhouse was quiet, just the two of them, no speeches, no cameras, no headlines. Lorenzo lit a candle near the reading bench. Camila brought wine in mismatched mugs. They sat in silence, not needing to speak, because after everything, disguise, betrayal, collapse, distance, they had found the rarest thing of all: peace. Earned, honest, undeniable. The days that followed were quiet but not empty. For the first time in his life, Lorenzo woke without dread, without weight, without the sound of gears grinding behind his ribs. The company no longer felt like a fortress he had to defend. It felt like a structure. He was allowed to reshape. And he did. The grow house expanded into 3 new neighborhoods. Within a month, partnerships with local schools were signed. Microgrants to small business owners began flowing through the Carranza Foundation, bypassing bureaucracy and red tape. His name was still controversial in some circles. The press painted him alternately as a visionary and a liability, but he didn't care. He wasn't performing anymore, and with Camila beside him, not as his shadow, but as his equal, a path ahead no longer terrified him. Camila, too, changed. Accepted the Dominguez Teaching Fellowship in ironic honor, given it now carried her family name. She worked part-time with the grow house while finalizing her certification, splitting her time between lesson plans, policy meetings, and long walks through the greenhouse at sunset. She didn't move in with Lorenzo. She didn't want to blend identities. She wanted to finish becoming who she was, on her own terms. And Lorenzo understood. More than that, he respected it. Their relationship wasn't a collision anymore. It was a rhythm, one that allowed space, growth, silence, and return. One evening, Camila visited her grandmother in the new care center. The woman's memory was fading, but her spirit was intact. "He's handsome," her grandmother said with a knowing smirk. "But don't let those rich boys make you soft." Camila laughed. "Too late for that." The older woman grew serious. "No," she said. "Soft isn't weak. Loving someone, trusting someone it's the bravest thing you'll ever do." Camila squeezed her hand, holding back tears. "I'm trying, I know. That's all you need to do." Meanwhile, across the city, Alonso Carranza packed up the last of his office. The board had forced his resignation in the quietest, cleanest way possible. No scandal, no public disgrace, just ... removal. He was offered a consultant, titled to save face. He declined. He left behind a legacy of intimidation, ambition, and fear, and no one chased him out the door. Lorenzo didn't gloat. He barely reacted when he heard the news. He was in the middle of cleaning a bookshelf at the grow house, surrounded by kids debating which superhero was the most ethical. He smiled once, whispered finally, and went back to shelving. That the war was over, and there was still so much to build. One Saturday morning, Camila showed up at the greenhouse earlier than usual. Lorenzo was kneeling in the dirt, repotting lavender. She watched him for a while before speaking. "I signed the lease on a new place," she said. He looked up, curious. Far closer. "It's got more light. A little garden." He stood, wiping his hands on a rag. "Sounds perfect. I was thinking, maybe you'd help me paint the walls." He tilted his head. "Are you asking me to move in?" She smirked. "No, I'm asking you to earn the right to be invited later." He laughed. "Deal." She stepped forward, kissed him, not hungrily, not as punctuation, as peace. That night they hosted a small celebration at the greenhouse. The kids were gone. The volunteers brought food. Someone set up string lights between the beams. Music played from a dusty speaker Camila found at a thrift store. It wasn't a gala. It was family. Lorenzo gave a short toast, nervous. "As always, in small groups. I used to think legacy meant wealth," he said. "Now I know it means impact." He raised his glass. "Two stories that don't start the way we expect, but end the way we deserve." Camila didn't speak. She just watched him, heart open, finally without fear. Later, as they cleaned up, she found something tucked behind the bookshelf, a small notebook, handwritten, old. She flipped through it. It was Lorenzo's mother's journal, filled with notes about the greenhouse, favorite flowers, dreams of turning it into a community space. It was all there, the blueprint, the vision. He found her holding it. "I didn't know it still existed," he whispered. "She dreamed this before you ever lived it." "She gave me the seed," he said. "You gave me the roots." They stood, together, not needing to say more. The greenhouse had come full circle, and so had they. The first rainfall of spring arrived softly. It tapped against Camila's window in rhythmic patterns, a quiet reminder that everything grows again, given enough time and care. She stood by the glass, holding a warm cup of coffee, watching the water roll down the panes like threads of memory. Her new apartment was still half in boxes. The walls were painted a soft clay red, Lorenzo's idea, which she initially hated, but now adored. There were bookshelves that hadn't been filled, curtains still missing, and a garden waiting to be touched by her hands. But it already felt like home because it was hers. No one had given it to her. No one had saved her. She had walked here on her own. The door opened quietly behind her. Lorenzo stepped in, his shirt damp from the rain, carrying 2 paper bags full of groceries and paintbrushes. He smiled. "I brought olives and chaos." Camila grinned. "Perfect combination." He placed the bags on the counter, kissed her cheek, then paused, watching her with the same quiet awe he always did. Not because she was unreachable, but because she had chosen to let herself be reached, and he would never take that for granted. Later, that day, they planted the first herbs in the small balcony garden. It wasn't much: basil, rosemary, a timid little lemon tree. Lorenzo insisted on naming the plants. Camilla laughed and told him it was ridiculous, then secretly labeled them when he wasn't looking. After they cooked together, burned the toast, undercooked the rice, overdid the garlic. They ate by candlelight anyway, on the floor, surrounded by unpacked boxes and the scent of something real in the air. It wasn't about perfection, it was about presence. In the weeks that followed, life settled into a rhythm. Camilla began her teaching fellowship, navigating lesson plans and crowded classrooms with the kind of grace only those forged in fire carry. She had her own students, now kids who looked at her like she held the entire map of the world in her hands. Lorenzo divided his time between growhouse expansions and quiet walks through neighborhoods where his last name no longer meant power but trust. They didn't become a power couple, they became a partnership, sometimes separate, always side by side. One warm evening, after a long day of teaching, Camilla arrived at the greenhouse alone. The doors were open, the place was quiet, the sun was melting over the glass ceiling, staining the floor in gold. She walked slowly, fingers grazing the tops of the benches, breathing in the scent of earth and lavender. At the back of the space, she saw something new, a plaque. It was small, bolted discreetly to one of the older beams. This place grew because one woman gave a stranger her kindness before he deserved it. In honor of Camila Dominguez, not for who she saved, but for who she chose to become. Camilla stared at it for a long time. Her heart didn't race, it slowed. She smiled, not because it was romantic, but because it was true. She had saved no one, but she had become everything. Later that night, she found Lorenzo sitting on their bench, reading a worn paperback. She sat beside him. "You didn't ask," she said softly. He looked up, confused. "Ask what?" "About moving in, about marriage, about forever." He closed the book, set it aside. "I didn't want you to say yes just because it was expected." She nodded. "Good." A pause. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out a single house key. She placed it in his hand. "I don't need saving," she said. "I don't need a ring or a name or a promise." He studied her. "But I want you, not because I need you, not because you make life easier, but because you make me braver." Lorenzo looked down at the key in his palm. It was more valuable than any fortune he'd ever inherited. "I love you," he said, "not as a chapter in my story, as my story itself." She smiled. "Then let's write it one day at a time." The rain began again. Outside, the city pulsed. Inside, two people, once broken, once hiding, sat beneath a glass ceiling, holding hands in the warm silence of a love chosen freely, not perfect, not promised, but planted, and finally, fully, in bloom.